The bog bodies. So here's where things get genuinely disturbing. Between the 1950s and now, over 1,000 bodies have been pulled from peat bogs across northern Europe. But we're not talking about recent victims. These are Iron Age people, preserved so perfectly that you can still see the stubble on their faces, their fingerprints, even the expressions frozen on their faces as they died. Take Tolland Man, discovered in Denmark in 1950. The preservation was so perfect that workers who found him called the police, thinking they'd stumbled on a recent murder. This man's face is still peaceful, almost serene. There's just one problem. There's a braided leather noose still wrapped tightly around his neck. But it gets worse. The Grauball man, found just 2 years later, tells a different story. His throat was slit from ear to ear with such force that it nearly decapitated him. And here's what makes your skin crawl. Scientists analyzed the contents of his stomach. His last meal was a porridge made from over 60 different types of seeds and grains. No one eats like that. This wasn't dinner. This was ritual. Now, the Lindo man from England, he experienced what researchers call overkill. He was hit on the head twice, had his throat cut, was strangled with a cord, and then had his neck broken. Then, and only then, was he placed carefully in the bog. The question that haunts archaeologists, why? Why this level of violence? Why preserve them this way? Some think these were human sacrifices to ancient gods. Others believe they were executed criminals. But the methodical nature of it, the careful placement in the bogs, the repeated patterns across different countries and centuries, there's something deliberate here that we still don't understand. The screaming mummies. Egyptian mummies are nothing new, right? We've seen them in museums our whole lives. But in 1886, archaeologists uncovered something in the Deir el-Bahari cache that wasn't supposed to exist. Unknown Man E. This mummy was different. While other mummies were carefully prepared, wrapped in fine linen, and placed peacefully in their sarcophagi, Unknown Man E was found with his face frozen in an eternal scream. His mouth is wide open, his face contorted in what looks like absolute agony. And unlike other mummies, he wasn't embalmed properly. He was wrapped in sheepskin, something Egyptians considered ritually unclean, and essentially left to decompose inside his wrappings. Modern CT scans revealed something even more terrifying. His hands and feet were bound. The position of his body suggests he might have been buried alive. And the expression? That's not something that happens after death. That's the face of someone who died in pure terror. Egyptologists now believe this might be Prince Pentauer, son of Rameses III, who was convicted of plotting to assassinate his father. His punishment? To be denied a proper burial, which in ancient Egyptian belief meant his soul would wander forever, unable to reach the afterlife. An eternity of suffering, starting the moment they sealed him in that tomb. There are other screaming mummies too, but Unknown Man E? His scream has echoed through 3,000 years. The Catacombs of Palermo. Walk into the Capuchin Catacombs in Palermo, Sicily, and you're not walking into a tomb. You're walking into a hallway of the dead, standing upright, dressed in their finest clothes, staring at you with hollow eyes. Over 8,000 bodies line these corridors. But these aren't skeletons or dust. These are mummified corpses, naturally preserved by the dry air of the catacombs, still wearing the clothes they were buried in centuries ago. Priests in their robes, children in their Sunday best, entire families standing together. But the most disturbing? Rosalia Lombardo. In 1920, a 2-year-old girl died of pneumonia, and her grief-stricken father couldn't let her go. He hired Alfredo Salafia, a master embalmer, to preserve her. What Salafia did was create what people call the world's most beautiful mummy. Rosalia looks like she's sleeping. Her blonde hair is still intact. Her skin still has a slight golden tone. You can see her eyelashes. Here's where it crosses into the unexplainable. People swear her eyes open and close. Cameras have caught what appears to be her eyelids moving. Scientists say it's a trick of the light, the angle, humidity changes affecting her delicate eyelid tissue. But guards who work there? They've seen it happen when no one's watching. Some refuse to go near her. Salafia took the secret of his preservation technique to his grave. It wasn't until 2009 that researchers found his handwritten notes describing a mixture of formalin, zinc salts, alcohol, salicylic acid, and glycerin. But even knowing the formula, no one's been able to replicate what he did with Rosalia. She's been down there for over 100 years now, still looking like she might wake up at any moment. The Herculaneum Scrolls. When Mount Vesuvius erupted in 79 AD, it didn't just bury Pompeii, it also buried the town of Herculaneum under 60 feet of volcanic material. And in a villa there, archaeologists found something extraordinary: an entire library of ancient scrolls. Here's the problem: they're carbonized. The heat from the eruption turned them into charcoal. If you try to unroll them, they crumble to dust. For over 250 years, we've had a complete Roman library containing works that could rewrite what we know about ancient philosophy, lost plays, scientific treatises, and we can't read them. Can you imagine that? Holding the only copy of a lost work by Aristotle, a play by Sophocles that's been missing for 2,000 years, the secret writings of ancient mathematicians, and not being able to open it without destroying it? Some scrolls that were carefully unrolled in the past revealed works by the Epicurean philosopher Philodemus, but that process destroyed most of the scroll. Hundreds more remain sealed. Recently, AI and advanced imaging have started to read the text without unrolling them, and what they're finding is staggering. New philosophical texts, unknown authors. But here's what keeps scholars awake at night. There was an upper floor to that library that was never excavated. It's still buried under Herculaneum. There could be hundreds more scrolls down there, possibly the greatest collection of lost ancient knowledge in existence. And we can't get to them because the modern town is built directly on top of the ruins. The most important library in human history is sitting 60 feet below someone's apartment building, and we can't touch it. The Bone Church of SEDLEC. In the small town of SEDLEC, Czech Republic, there's a chapel decorated entirely with human bones. And I don't mean a few skulls in a corner. I mean 40,000 to 70,000 complete human skeletons, arranged into chandeliers, coats of arms, and architectural decorations. The SEDLEC ossuary looks like something from a nightmare. A chandelier made from every bone in the human body hangs from the center of the chapel. Garlands of skulls drape across the ceiling. Chalices made from pelvic bones sit on altars. And in the corner, arranged in perfect symmetry, is the coat of arms of the Schwarzenberg family, made entirely from bones. Here's the history that makes it even darker. In 1278, the abbot of SEDLEC scattered soil from Jerusalem across the cemetery. Word spread that being buried there would guarantee salvation. Suddenly, everyone wanted to be buried in SEDLEC. During the Black Death in the 14th century and the Hussite Wars in the 15th century, tens of thousands died and were buried there. The cemetery was overflowing. So in 1511, a half-blind monk was given the task of exhuming bodies and stacking the bones in the chapel. For decades, he worked alone, digging up the dead, arranging their remains. Then, in 1870, a woodcarver named František Rindt was hired to organize the bones. What he created was this macabre masterpiece. But here's what disturbs researchers: the precision, the artistry. Every bone is positioned with care, and the sheer number to create these decorations required meticulous selection, matching bones by size, deciding which skull goes where. František Rindt spent months, maybe years, surrounded by death, touching the bones of plague victims, war casualties, children, creating beauty from horror. And at the bottom of the bone coat of arms, he signed his name, in bones. The tomb of the sunken skulls. In 2009, archaeologists excavating an ancient lakebed in Motala, Sweden, found something that defies explanation. At the bottom of what was once a shallow lake, they discovered a series of wooden stakes. Mounted on top of these stakes were 11 human skulls. But this wasn't a burial, this wasn't a battle site. This was a deliberate underwater installation. The skulls were carefully placed on the stakes, some still containing brain tissue preserved by the lake water. Two of the skulls had pieces of other skulls jammed inside them, like a grotesque nesting doll. And here's where it gets stranger. The skulls were a mix of men and women, different ages, but all died around the same time, about 8,000 years ago. Some showed signs of blunt force trauma. Others had been carefully cleaned and processed, and they were placed in this specific location, underwater, in a pattern that suggests ritual significance. But what ritual? Why underwater? Why some skulls inside others? The site dates back to the Mesolithic period. These were hunter-gatherers, people we know very little about. They left no written records, no clear cultural context for us to understand this. Some archaeologists think it was a way of honoring the dead, placing them in the boundary between land and water, between the living world and whatever they believed came next. Others think it's evidence of violence between groups, a warning display of defeated enemies. But then, why the careful placement? Why the ritual elements? The Tomb of the Sunken Skulls remains one of the most bizarre archaeological discoveries in European prehistory, and we're no closer to understanding it now than when it was first uncovered. OTZI the Iceman. In 1991, two hikers in the Italian Alps stumbled across what they thought was a recent murder victim frozen in the ice. Except this wasn't recent. This body had been there for over 5,300 years, and when scientists examined him closer, they found something that still sends chills down their spines. OTZI the Iceman didn't just die. He was murdered. There's an arrowhead lodged in his shoulder, traces of 4 different people's blood on his clothes, and defensive wounds all over his hands. But here's the thing that keeps researchers up at night. The last meal in his stomach was still being digested, which means whatever happened to him happened fast. The evidence suggests he was running. He'd recently been in at least 2 violent confrontations. There's blood from 4 different people on his gear, someone's blood on his knife, someone else's on his arrows. He'd eaten a meal of ibex meat and grain just hours before his death. Then came the fatal shot, an arrow to the back hitting his subclavian artery. He would have bled out in minutes. But here's what's strange. Whoever killed him didn't take his valuable copper axe, didn't take his equipment, just left him there. Was this revenge? A hunt? A tribal conflict? CT scans show he had injuries from weeks before. Broken ribs, head trauma. This man was in trouble long before that final arrow. And there's one more unsettling detail. Several people who worked on excavating or studying OTZI have died in unusual circumstances. The forensic pathologist who examined him died in a car crash on his way to a conference about OTZI. The mountain climber who guided his recovery fell to his death. Some call it the curse of OTZI. 5,300 years later, and this murder case is still unsolved. The Tower of Skulls. In 2015, archaeologists working beneath Mexico City uncovered something that made even experienced researchers step back in shock. They found a tower, but this wasn't made of stone or brick. It was made entirely of human skulls. The Huitzompantli, as it's called, was part of the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan. And when I say Tower of Skulls, I mean hundreds of skulls stacked deliberately, mortared together with lime, creating a structure over 16 feet in diameter. Men, women, and children. Their skulls pierced with holes so they could be displayed on wooden racks before being added to the tower. But here's what makes your blood run cold. These weren't enemy warriors. DNA analysis revealed something unexpected. Many of these people were locals. Some were women. Some were children as young as 5 years old. The Spanish conquistadors wrote about seeing these skull towers when they arrived in 1521, and they were horrified. One account describes rows upon rows of skulls, tens of thousands of them, displayed throughout the city, but historians thought they were exaggerating. They thought it was propaganda to justify their conquest. They weren't exaggerating. The tower keeps growing. Every excavation uncovers more skulls, more layers. Current estimates suggest the main skull rack held over 60,000 skulls at its peak. And this is just one of several throughout the city. The purpose? Human sacrifice on an industrial scale. The Aztecs believed the sun god Huitzilopochtli needed constant nourishment through human blood and hearts, or the sun would stop rising. So they sacrificed thousands of people every year. After the hearts were removed, the bodies were decapitated, and the skulls were added to the displays. What haunts researchers is the efficiency of it. This wasn't random violence. This was systematic, organized, ritualized mass killing that went on for decades. The tower wasn't hidden. It was in the center of the city, a constant reminder of what their religion demanded. And the locals? They lived with this every day, walked past towers of human skulls on their way to the market, grew up seeing it as normal.